What's going on, growers? It's James Prigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Today, I'm going to share with you 10 crops you'd be foolish not to plant in March. Let's go! Let's jump right into it with my all-time favorite crop to grow, tomatoes. Nothing compares to homegrown tomatoes. There are so many different kinds, like cherry tomatoes, beefsteak tomatoes, there's yellow ones, pink ones, orange ones, streaked ones, and anything else you could think of. Now is a good time to get your tomatoes planted to set them up for a productive summer if you live in zone 7A like me. Let me show you how I plant my tomatoes. First, what we want to do is make sure we wet down our potting mix before we start adding it to the cells. Then we'll take our potting mix, we'll grab our Vego cell and start adding the potting mix to the bottom, just like this. Then what we want to do is firmly press down our potting mix. This way we have no air gaps at the bottom. We do not want that. Then I'll take some more soil and just fill the rest of this cell, gently pressing it down. Next, we'll start to make a small indentation for our tomato seed to fit in. We only want to plant it about 1/4 inch deep. It doesn't have to be super deep. So we'll make that indentation with the Sharpie marker. I like using this because it's just easy to push into the soil and gives me a nice indentation and depression to get my tomato seed in. Then we'll grab our tomato seed. I'm going to plant the Chadwick cherry tomato. We'll open this up, and you can grab these on the site teamgrow.us. It's only $2 for a pack of seeds. Then I'll grab some of my tomato seeds, about 2 of them, and we'll drop them into the soil just like that, and then cover them up. Next, we'll water this in. You can use a hand sprayer like I'm doing right here, or you could just use a watering can. We only just want to lightly water it in just to settle the soil around the seed. Tomato seeds will sprout in about 6 to 8 days if the temperature of the soil is between 75 degrees Fahrenheit and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. To help get us the ideal temperatures, what I suggest you do is grab a heat mat and throw this under your tomato seeds after you've got them planted. If the temperature of the soil when planting tomatoes is like below 75 degrees, or below 70 degrees, then your seeds will sprout much slower. So a heat mat makes a big difference. Another thing with germination is making sure that the soil remains relatively moist, because if you think about it, our seed is in the top 1/4 inch of the soil. To help keep the soil consistently moist, we'll take a cover like this, dome, and drop it over the top. We want to make sure that we're coming back every day or so, or every couple days, to open this up, just to make sure we give the soil some air so it doesn't get any algae or mold growing. Tomatoes grow quick once they sprout, and they need space not only for their foliage, but also for their roots. I suggest having an area ready for when your tomatoes explode into growth. You can either put them in a greenhouse, or you could get a grow light set up inside. I have an exciting announcement. We've gotten so many questions about how we start our seeds and how we grow our plants for our garden. So I wanted to show you exactly how I do it. Over the last few months, I've put together the 21-day seed starting challenge. It's not a course, it's a challenge where we will grow together as a community. You'll learn everything I do to grow healthy seedlings, and we'll all support each other, guaranteeing more successful gardens and a better future. Let's get growing together. Hit the link down below to join the challenge. Let's transition into a group of crops you should be planting now. They all have similar germination and growth requirements. I'm talking about brassicas. Cauliflower is one of my favorite spring veggies to grow. It creates such beautiful heads and comes in many different shapes and colors. Cabbages are equally as beautiful. Homegrown ones are sweet and delicious, and they come in different shapes, different textures, and are super nutritious. Broccoli is a lot of fun to grow as well. They don't come in as unique colors and shapes as cabbages or cauliflower, but man, do they taste good when they're homegrown. You can't forget about kale either. This is one of the easiest brassicas to grow because we just eat it for the leaves. And some varieties, like the scarlet kale and the dazzling blue kale, look as good as they taste. Brussels sprouts are a great option as well. They're just going to take a little bit longer than something like your cauliflower or your cabbage. When it comes to planting, brassicas tend to be one of the easiest ones to germinate and get growing. Let me show you how I plant my brassicas. We're going to plant an early Jersey Wakefield cabbage, but if you're planting kale or cauliflower or Brussels sprouts, the process will be the same. we're gonna grab our standard Vego cell and we take our soil that we've already saturated, it's nice and moist, and we'll just drop it in, just like this. Then we'll press the soil down at the bottom, again, to make sure that we have no air gaps at the bottom. And then we'll fill the remaining of the cell with some soil and then just lightly press it down, just like this. Next, I'll take this Sharpie and lightly make an indentation. We only want it about 1/4 of an inch deep, just like that. They don't need to be deep because these cabbage seeds are pretty small seed. We'll take our seed, just like this, and cabbage come with a lot of seeds, especially if you order them from us. There's about 300 seed in here. So we're gonna take a few seed, probably about 3 or so, and then just drop them into our hole, 2, 3, just like that. Then lightly cover it up, and then we'll just mist it to water it in. Brassicas will germinate in a wide range of temperatures from about 45 degrees all the way up to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, so you don't need a heat mat. At those temperatures, they'll only take about 4 to 7 days to sprout. You wanna make sure you have that lid on top, but again, like I mentioned earlier, you wanna make sure you're burping the tray, taking the lid off to give your soil some air to breathe. When it comes to brassicas though, that tends to not be an issue because they germinate so quickly. They don't need light to germinate. So if you want, you could just take the cell and put it anywhere in a room. Just regularly go back and make sure to see if the seed sprouted. Once you see the seed pressing out of the soil, make sure you bring it to a spot that gets full light. A good spot would be under a grow light. Then, once your seedlings are out of the soil, you want to keep the temperatures not too much above 60 degrees. You know, maybe 65 to 70 degrees is okay. But if it starts to get too warm, like above 72, 74, 75 degrees, then your brassicas might start to get leggy because it's just too warm for them. The next crop to get planted in March is lettuce. Lettuce is such a great crop to grow because it grows super fast. It looks beautiful with all the different colors and textures you can grow. And also, it's an easy crop to get a harvest from because we're just growing it for the leaves. If you want, you can plant your lettuce in a standard cell just like this, but I want to show you a way that I do it, which allows me to plant so many seed really quickly, and it's super easy. We're going to grab our Vego 76 cell tray right here, take our soil and just drop it in, push it down to the bottom, and then lightly fill it up with some more soil. We'll do the same thing with this whole tray. I'm not going to show you every one, but I'll show you what it looks like. It's at the perfect stage. You can see we've got the whole thing filled with soil that is already saturated. Then we're going to grab our plant and pot board. This thing lines up with the cell perfectly, and we'll line it up just like this. Next, we're going to lightly press it down. We don't want to press it down hard because lettuce doesn't like to be planted deep. You could actually surface sow your lettuce, so you don't want to press this down hard. So what we do is we make some small indentations. As you notice, there's very slight indentations in here. After that, we can take our seeds and start dropping them in these holes. If you miss the hole with some of them, it's cool. It's like a little funnel here. You could just take these seeds and press them in. The awesome thing about it is you can go through the whole thing very, very quickly, dropping seeds in each hole. Then we can remove this, and the seeds, you can see, are perfectly lined up right in the center. It's so easy to plant lettuce like this because lettuce seeds, these are pretty tiny and hard to manage. Then we could lightly cover it, just slightly. You don't even have to cover it if you don't want to. You could surface sow it, but I lightly like to cover it just almost completely and then water it in. Lettuce seed actually needs light to germinate, so you don't want to bury them deep. Like I mentioned, you could just surface sow and water it in. The temperature of the soil that they like to germinate is between 40 and 85 degrees, but if the temperature of the soil is above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, then that will slow down germination. So it's better to keep the range between like 50 and 70 degrees. At that temperature range, it will only take about 3 to 7 days for your lettuce to sprout. Then this thing will be covered with plants, and it's such a fast, efficient way to grow your lettuce, and it's my favorite way to do it. So I can't wait to be eating some fresh lettuce. It won't be long because this stuff grows quick. Another crop you'd be foolish not to plant in March are carrots. Carrots were Tuck's all-time favorite crop from the garden. Whenever I'd pull one out of the ground, this guy would show up and start snacking on them. I started planting my carrots in mid-March. One thing about carrots is they don't like to be started in cells and then transplanted into the garden, so I suggest you direct sow your carrots. A tricky thing about that is germination could be tough sometimes because the carrots don't like to be planted deep, but also they need to remain moist, the soil, for a pretty long period of time, almost like 2 weeks sometimes. So what I suggest you do is known as the carrot board method. You could make a slight indentation in the soil, then drop your seeds in, then just lightly cover it up barely with some soil, and take this board and cover your carrot seeds. Then in about 5 days, come back and take a peek, see if the carrot seeds start to sprout. Once you see them start to sprout, remove the board. The board technique works so good because it helps the soil remain moist so you can get good consistent germination for your carrots. Just make sure you go out there regularly to check if your carrot seeds are starting to sprout because you don't want the cover to stay on while they're sprouting. We got into a few edible crops. Now let's switch it up and get into some flowers which help support our crops and also bring in pollinators. Fantastic flowers like Borage and Marigolds. Borage has to be one of the greatest companion flowers out there. It's even said to make other plants taste better. For instance, tomatoes, when you plant your borage next to it, they say it makes the tomatoes taste better, and that's where I tend to plant it. Another cool thing about borage is the leaves are actually edible. They have a sort of cucumber flavor to them. When it comes to germination, borage is an easy one to sprout. Here's the seeds. We just make a indentation about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch deep. Take a couple seeds, drop them in, cover it up, and then water it. Next, we'll cover it with a lid. When it comes to your borage, it likes sprouting at temperatures about 60 to 70 degrees for the temperature of the soil. At that temperature, it'll take about 7 to 14 days to sprout. One thing about borage is it does need light to sprout. So after we get this planted, we want to make sure we stick this underneath our grow lights. Marigolds not only come in an array of colors, but they're also a great companion in the garden. They repel nematodes, and they also give off a strong odor that confuses pests and helps protect your prized veggies. Now, let's get into a few herbs you'd be foolish not to plant in March. First up is basil. No herb complements tomatoes quite like basil does. They taste great together, and another thing is they grow great together. Basil is a companion for tomatoes. It's said to repel some pests with its strong odor, and it's also said to make your tomatoes taste better when planted in close proximity. Basil seeds are small and they don't like to be planted deep, no more than 1/4 of an inch. You could even just surface sow your basil. I'll lightly make a very small indentation and then drop some basil seeds in and barely cover them all the way. Then we'll just water it in and cover it with our dome. The temperature of the soil that they like is about 70 to 85 degrees, so it's a good idea to have a heat mat underneath your cell just to make sure you get those good temperatures and get good germination. At the correct temperatures, it'll take about 5 to 10 days for your basil seeds to germinate. One important thing, just like our lettuce and some of our flowers, basil needs light to sprout. So after you get these planted, make sure you stick it underneath your light. Next up on the list for what you need to plant in March is cilantro. I love cilantro, but some people say that it has a soapy flavor. The seeds of cilantro are also the spice coriander, so it's kind of like a dual use herb. Let me show you how I get my cilantro planted. Cilantro doesn't have small seed, so you would think you plant these pretty deep, but the seed needs light to sprout. So when planting our cilantro, we don't want to plant them deep. Just make a slight indentation, drop a few of these seeds in, and you don't have to completely cover it, just lightly dust over just like that, and then water it in. We'll throw our dome on top. When it comes to germination temperatures, they like the temperatures to be about 50 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, so a heat mat isn't necessary for something like your cilantro. At those temperatures, it'll take about 7 to 14 days for your seeds to sprout, and again, they need light to sprout, so make sure after you get them planted, you stick them under a grow light. The next crop is one you could plant once, now, and it will feed you all year long. I'm talking about Swiss chard. This plant has beautiful leaves and is super nutritious. You could plant your Swiss chard now and it will continue to produce all year for you through the chill of spring, the heat of summer, and the cold of winter. Swiss chard is an easy one to get growing. We'll just make a hole about a 1/2 inch deep, take our seeds and drop them right in and cover them up. They don't require light to germinate, so we can fully cover them. Then we'll water them in. Pop our lid on top. The temperature of the soil that they like is a wide range, about 50 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. The optimal temperature is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. At those temperatures, they'll take about 7 to 14 days to sprout. And again, they don't need light, so you could take this and throw it in a room in your house until you see them starting to press out of the soil. Then toss it underneath a grow light or in a greenhouse. Another crop you'd be foolish not to get planted in March is spinach. Spinach is an awesome, highly nutritious green to grow, and a cool thing about it is it's great for cut and come again. I love growing spinach. It tastes delicious, it looks great, and it's one of my all-time favorite greens to get early in the spring. When it comes to spinach, it likes to be direct sown. It doesn't really like growing in a seed cell and then being transplanted out because it has a really long taproot. You could transplant out your spinach, but I have always had better success direct sowing my spinach. At the end of March, you could just drop your spinach in the ground. What I like to do is right around the end of March or early April, I'll take my spinach seeds, I'll soak them for 24 hours before planting, then I'll take those seeds and plant them 4 per square foot. After they pop out of the ground, I'll thin them out. When it comes to your spinach, I suggest you direct sow. Right now is also a great time to get your arugula planted. Arugula is a delicious spring green to grow. It has a good nutty flavor to it, and it's a fantastic plant for cut and come again. When it comes to growing your arugula seeds, there's a few things about it that I want to mention. First off, it's in the brassica family, so you would think that the germination requirements are the same as something like your cabbage, but they're a little bit different. When it comes to planting your arugula seeds, first you want to plant them about 1/4 inch deep. That's a good depth. They don't need light to germinate, so you could fully cover them with soil, but the thing is, they like cooler temperatures, ideally between about 45 and 70 degrees. Once the temperature gets above like 85 degrees, then your arugula seeds might not sprout because they like cooler temperatures. Another thing you can do is just directly sow your arugula like your spinach once the soil warms up and you can start to work in the soil, because again, they like those cooler temperatures. Make sure you get your arugula planted early because it's known to bolt once the heat comes. That's why I love growing a variety like the slow bolt arugula. It has good heat tolerance. I want to mention you still have time to get your eggplants and peppers planted. I got into those in more detail in the last video, but don't worry, you still have some time to get them in the ground. Here's why. When it comes to growing things like tomatoes or even peppers or eggplants, they'll often say to plant them about 8 weeks before your last expected frost date, especially for your eggplant and peppers. So my last expected frost date is April 19th. Here's the thing though, when it comes to actually planting those things in the ground, I won't plant things like my tomatoes, my peppers, or my eggplants into the ground until the 2nd week of May, which is almost 4 weeks after my last expected frost date, because that's just truly when the weather warms up around here. I know that because I have been journaling like the timing and what the weather's like in my location for the last 10 years, so I can reference all that. So when it comes to getting your things planted, don't worry if it's not 8 weeks before the last expected frost date. It's more about giving your plants enough time, say 6 to 8 weeks, to grow before you actually transplant them into the ground. So don't worry, you probably still have time to get some of your tomatoes and your eggplants in the ground. Like I always say, it's usually better to plant things a little late rather than too early, or you're left with just a bunch of plants, you have nowhere to put them. You gotta just keep potting them up, or you gotta try to plant them in the garden too early. They don't do well. So don't stress, you still have time to get a lot of those summer plants, summer seeds into the ground now. You got this. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. The weather is finally starting to heat up here. It's like a pretty nice day, but then the wind's coming and it's gonna get cold tomorrow. We're in the shoulder season. That's just what happens. But it's the perfect time to get some of this stuff planted inside so that when the true nice weather comes, you have a lot of healthy seedlings that are ready to be put into the garden and you could make the most of your season. I want to mention again that we have our new 21-day seed challenge going. You guys need to be a part of it. I'm going in absolute detail, step-by-step lessons on how I start my seeds to equip you guys with the best knowledge and information so you can grow healthy, happy seedlings. I want to also mention a thank you to one of our new, well actually recurring channel members, Kyle McFadden. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. Thanks for having your hand in everything we're doing out here. In a short amount of time, the green will start showing up in the garden and this whole place will just start kicking out so much food. I cannot wait. But it's all about right now making the investments that are going to pay off in the growing season. So you got to make sure you're getting all these things planted today. That's today's video. We hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back again real soon. We